Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to beautiful Kira Beach here on the Gold Coast. This is where I started a lot of my diving career in the early days. Just up to the north there, I had my first dive ever when I was about 14 or 15 years old in the south there, Tweed Heads. I've spent a lot of time there, shot a lot of really cool fish there over the years. One of my favorite places in the world to dive actually. Today I'm going to be doing that Q&A video that I said I was going to do. It's a little bit late, but I've been in Australia, been pretty busy, been getting heaps of content down here. I've probably got about 6 videos for you guys from down under here, which is going to be coming out over the next few months. But today, Q&A, I just want to say a massive thanks to all 50,000 of you out there that have subscribed to my channel and believed in what I'm doing. I never want to just be entertainment. I always want to give some value back to you guys that watch. So thanks very much for supporting the channel. 50,000 people. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think that that's a decent sized stadium of people out there that actually like my videos enough to click a subscribe button. Also doing a giveaway today. There's details of that at the end of the video, so you can check that out. So stick around and I'm gonna answer some questions that you guys sent in via Instagram and YouTube. So this Q&A is probably long overdue. I put this up a couple weeks ago and I'm gonna get through the questions today. I'm just gonna read them off this and give it my best shot. So, question number 1. How old were you when you started spearfishing and how did I get into it? So I think I was around 14 or 15 years old when I first started spearfishing. It was the summer of 2004, I believe. My brother was at university and he was either going to be doing kite surfing or spearfishing, and he figured that there were more flat days than rough days, so he took up spearfishing and I followed suit right here on the Gold Coast, just about a couple kilometers up the road there at the Gold Coast Seaway. I had my first ever dive and spent a lot of my time around here on the Gold Coast, northern New South Wales, Tweed Heads, cutting my teeth, shooting flathead and all other fish like that. So that's how I started and it never really stopped. Why did you move to England? This is a very complicated question, but essentially my wife and I decided that we wanted to try something new, travel the world a little bit more, seek some new careers, and London was the obvious choice. We had a little bit of family there. So we packed up our stuff and 3.5 years later, that's it. How do you make connections to travel to these exotic locations? Mostly I just tend to go by myself, and if I want to go to a particularly new area, say Italy, Malta, I will find some local spearing groups online. I will do some research. I will generally check out YouTube, look for some diving videos there, and then try and make up an informed decision about where I'm going to go. And if I find someone there that's offering to take me out, I'll do that. But most of the time I've just sort of gone and found these places to go and then met people along the way. I've had a few great contacts like Jose Seppala, he's really helped me with the Scandinavian type diving. Giuliano Tagliacozzo from Italy, he's helped me with all the sort of Mediterranean stuff. But generally I just reach out and get there. It's not so much that I've got these great connections, but you just got to have a go and talk to people. Do carbon fins make that much of a difference to justify the upgrade? Depending on what you're upgrading from, I think carbon fins from plastic fins are a massive difference. I notice the difference between carbon fins and say a composite fin, mostly because of the weight. So when you're kicking all day in a competition, if you have less weight on your legs through a lighter blade, you're probably going to be less fatigued at the end of the day. So for me, carbon fins, that's what I use. I use the Divar Negras, and I've used Divar Carbons previously to that for many years, 5-6 years. Beautiful fins. There's probably other good fins on the market as well. You don't just have to be limited to Divars, but yeah, carbon fins have come a long way since sort of the mid-2000s, where they had a reputation for breaking all the time, but they can still be a little bit fragile, but like anything, if you treat it right, it's not gonna break. What is your favorite fish to eat that is just plain, not in a curry? In Australia, I'd have to say pearl perch. Have you and will you come to New Zealand to spear? I've never speared in New Zealand. I've only gone through the airport at Auckland on my way to Tonga. I have a sister that lives in Auckland, so I will probably be there at some stage, and I'd love to go there and shoot a big snapper, John Dory, boarfish, all the species they have to offer, and those really massive monster crayfish, they're pretty cool too. Favorite fish to spear? In Australia, I'm probably most stoked to shoot a snapper or a coronation trout off my home waters in Brisbane, just because they present such a challenge, and not that they're rare in any way, it's just that you have to work hard for them. Sometimes you get dumb ones like every fish, but most of the time you have to work hard for them. They're great to eat, one of my favorite fish to eat. Love baking them whole as well if you get a 1 or 2 kilo fish. And around Europe, I don't think I've shot my favorite fish yet, but I suspect it will be a Dentex. So this next question is one I get all the time. How do I hold my breath longer? How do I dive deeper? For me, I don't really look at how deep I'm diving or how long I'm holding my breath as a measure of how much success I have spearfishing. For me, it's number one, am I having fun? If I'm not having fun, who gives a crap? Secondly is, am I actually doing what I set out to achieve, which is more than likely getting a feed of scallops or some shellfish, crayfish, or fish? If I'm achieving that, does it really matter how deep you shot something? No. But the reality is some fish do tend to reside in deeper waters, particular species. I'm not gonna lie, that's just a fact. You know, it's a lot easier to shoot a red emperor, for instance, a Lajanus sabe in Australia if you're diving in 30 meters of water plus. But that doesn't mean to say that you can't shoot them in shallower water. I've shot my biggest one in about 20 meters of water. It was 12.5 kilos. So you don't have to get caught up on this whole depth and breath hold. How long did I hold my breath? What's my longest dive time and all that sort of stuff. Sometimes those are key things in your arsenal to have, but it's not the purpose of spearfishing for me personally. And I don't really do a lot of training for spearfishing other than going spearfishing or just keeping general cardio and fitness. The biggest thing for me to have a good dive is to relax and be comfortable in the water. If you've got a leaking mask, you've got an ill-fitting wetsuit, if you're tired, if you're hungry, if you've got reflux, any of these key factors are going to make sure that your dive is not as good as it could be. So key things, just get relaxed. That's the biggest thing in the water. I love this question from Isaac. I love spearfishing, but go once in a blue moon. It feels like every time I go back to diving, I'm starting from square one with the breathing and fitness side of it. How do you keep building lung capacity and breath hold when you're not in the water? This has never really been a problem for me until I moved to England and you have an off season in winter where there's just no fish or there's closed season for bass, so there's not really much point in me going out in 7 or 8 degree water in January for a few hours of light to get not a whole heap. So when I come out of that off season, I will go for a big run, try and get some fitness and cardio about me, you know, do a lot of squats just to get the legs up, used to that finning technique, or go for a swim at a local pool with your fins on just to get used to that sort of feeling of using fins and a snorkel. But I never do any breath hold exercises at a pool. I'm always on the surface. One of the main things that helps me is actually just stopping before you get in the water and try and remember all the things that you have learned. A proper duck dive, breathing technique. Do I slow down? I calm myself. I, remember all the things that you've learned, these little things that you've learned during the on season that you kind of forget when you're in the off season. So I would say that just slow down, remember that you're not going to be performing at your best, and just try and remember those little things, the duck dives, the taking the snorkel out, the quietness. All those sort of things will help you get back to where you were, and there's an odd familiarity about doing these things when you get back in the water after a long dry spell. What are my gear essentials? For me at the moment, it is the P-tube on the wetsuit. Man, that thing will change your life. I highly recommend getting a P-tube. I don't come home from diving smelling like a Yeti, and I don't have skin rashes and stuff from pissing on myself for 6 days straight. So P-tube, gear essential. What's the best tip for a beginner to get calm underwater? Aside from the obvious of relaxing and enjoying it, I think if you want to be calm underwater, you need to build up slowly. So don't go out on a day where the sea's rough and it's massive, because you're probably not going to have a good time. You might freak out a little bit. So go in some protected areas, pick your weather a little bit more, build your comfort level up slowly in the water, and eventually you'll be able to dive in just about everything. So what suggestion would you give to someone wanting to start out spearfishing? I would say join a club. Join a spearfishing club. You tap into a wealth of personal knowledge that is something that you're not going to find anywhere online, that personal sort of one-to-one with guys that know what they're doing, that have been doing it for many years. And I find the club scene can be a little bit intimidating at first, but once you get in there and people know that you're not just someone that's there for a weekend and you're gonna disappear again, you might find that they'll invest a bit more time in you. And for me, a club scene was the best thing I ever did. I learned a lot about species recognition during club competitions and getting to know different people and how they dive, and you can take a little bit of their knowledge and add it to your own every time. That's a bit of a Justin Lee axiom there. If you don't know who Justin Lee is, Big Island Boy on Instagram. Coolest Hawaiian guy I've ever seen. Big smile, you'll know who he is. If there was one place in the world that you could go spearfishing that you haven't already been, where would it be? Whew. As odd as this sounds, I really want to go to Greenland or Svalbard to go spearfishing, and they're kind of turbo Arctic locations. I think it'd be really exotic. It'd be hard not to get eaten by a polar bear, which is a bit of a reality in some of those locations. Not the reason that I want to go, but just because I don't think that it's been done too many times, and I just love the challenge and the vastness of the ice up there. I think that'd be a really cool thing to do. Scariest experience while spearfishing. So for me, this is a no-brainer. Diving off my hometown of Brisbane, off a place called Moreton Island. Anyone that's dived there knows on the north side of Flinders Reef with a run-out tide and a southeasterly swell, yeah, the waves stick up way bigger than anywhere else on that part of the reef system. And I was diving there with Pete. We'd come out off the eastern side after we were looking for some mackerel. I yelled up to Pete, I said, "Hey Pete, let's get some lunch. I'm starving." I look up for the boat. Didn't see the boat. Where's the boat? Yelling, "Ashley," our boat driver wasn't really responding. I was like, "This is odd. They'll come and get us eventually." He's probably picking up the other guy in the water. And as I look up over a wave, I see something that you never want to see, and that was the underside of the hull. And Steve just perched on top of this hull, grabbing on for dear life, holding onto the chines of the boat with the motor sticking out of the water. It was completely flipped. What had happened is Ashley had turned the boat and a freak wave came and hit the side of it, rolled it over. Unfortunately, that boat landed on him. He had a cracked vertebrae, a broken rib. So we basically sort of swam over to this boat, Pete and I. And yeah, I just had one of those moments where I was like, is this real? Is this, that's real. We're in a bit of trouble here. And Steve had managed to get out the anchor from under the nose of the boat. The esky was providing a lot of flotation on the boat and keeping it upright, so the current was going out this with the anchor here and it's kind of keeping it afloat. So we just clung to that with an EPIRB and flares for about 3.5 hours until a helicopter came down. The guy in the winch came down, put a strop around us, lifted us up like this. One by one, dropped us on top of the reef because it was low tide, so the reef comes out of water at low tide there. Dropped us one by one on top of the reef, then landed the helicopter on top of Flinders Reef, and then took us 2 by 2 to the helipad on Cape Morton. Helicopter from the PA came, Princess Alexandra Hospital came, took Ashley straight to the hospital, and the rest of us got a chopper trip back to Archerfield, where we got there in our wetsuits and fins and had to get Steve's wife to pick us up, take us back to the boat ramp to pick up a boat, trailer and car with no boat on it, which is a really sobering, horrible thing to have happen. And I think there was a few tears shed by Steve on the way back with his boat, that he knew it was sinking and he wasn't taking it back home. The good news is, a day later, my friend Tony Hugh and Simon Baldwin went out. The next day, the weather had dropped right off. They located the boat in about 35 meters of water. Tony went down, grabbed what he could out of it, grabbed the GPS mark off it. 5 days later, Steve went back with a massive boat, scuba tanks and chaff bags, floated the boat up, towed it back, restored it, bish bash bosh, ready to go again in a couple months with a new motor. So that was probably one of the most scary experiences I've had while spearfishing. All right, let's move on to something a little bit lighter. Have you ever done a freediving course? I have not, and I don't think I will do a freediving course because I'm interested in spearfishing, so I would probably go for a spearfishing course, not a freediving course. Do I have any sinus pain when diving and any tips for sinus health? I've probably had more sinus pain than most people I know. I've in fact had my sinuses drilled out twice, my maxillary sinuses down here and my frontal sinuses up the front, or the other way around. I'm pretty sure this is the frontal, that's maxillary. I've had those bored out by an ENT surgeon, and I used to get a lot of clogged sinuses up here, burst blood vessels, come up with masks full of blood. Not good. That was probably about 8 years ago. I suffered really heavily from sinus problems. Biggest tips for sinus for me is keep your sinuses under control. If it's hay fever season, try and take antihistamines to keep it not irritated. I don't drink before I go diving because I find particularly red wines have sulfites in them and preservatives that send my hay fever off. And keep hydrated. That's probably the biggest thing. And after that, equalize on the surface before you dive. It surprises me how many people don't equalize before they dive off the surface. They try and do it at 3 or 4 meters as their first time they're equalizing, which is a disaster. Even I wouldn't make it to the bottom if I started doing that. So yeah, just look after your body, I guess. Keep it in good shape. How do you get the right angle on your GoPro head strap? I tend to line up the front lens element of the GoPro with the lens on my mask and on the goggly, masky things. Yeah, make sure they're parallel and you'll have a good time for your angle. I tend to film in 2.7K wide, 50 frames per second. I use ProTune a lot so I don't get that shifting white balance. You know, some videos you see, there'll be a blue scene and then boom, it'll suddenly go green, it'll look a bit funky. That's because you're using auto white balance. You have to use the ProTune settings to alleviate that problem. What's next? Next. Any chronic health issues me or my dive buddies have encountered? Seasickness. I get very seasick if I don't take my little magic pills called Avamine. They've worked for me for the last 15 years. I've thrown up maybe once or twice, and that's probably due to fatigue or actually being sick from something else. Great little pills. I'm not sure if you can buy them in Australia anymore, but essentially it's just a turbo antihistamine, which happens to work as a motion sickness control. How do you learn all the fish species? In Australia, if you want to learn fish species, go to a competition. You will see so many different fish species. You will learn all of them because they're on a score sheet. That's probably the best way to learn all the different fish species, I would say. Competition diving, not everyone's cup of tea, but you can certainly learn a lot from it. Do you have a day job, and what is it? Yes, I have a day job. At the moment, I am a cinematographer and editor. I work in a studio in London where I shoot and edit and pilot drones for a living. So kind of a dream, fun job that I've chased after pretty hard for the last couple of years. And prior to that, I was an industrial electrician in Australia and did more high-end residential stuff in London for about 3 years. The one fish I still want to shoot, that is an absolute no-brainer for me. It is a Mediterranean dentex, scientific name dentex dentex. For me, this is one of those fish that I saw being shot as a kid, maybe when I was 16, 17 years old, by the guys in the Mediterranean, and it's such a highly prized fish. I've seen them once in Italy before. Have to go back to the Mediterranean, but 100% the fish I want to shoot next, or my next sort of bucket list fish, is a Mediterranean dentex. Thanks for sending in all those questions, guys. That was really cool to see what you guys want to know, and hopefully you learned a little bit or got some value out of it. If you want to win the mask that I was talking about at the start of the video, all you have to do is jump over to my Instagram, Daniel___man. Pretty crappy handle, but that's all I could get at the time. Make sure that you're following me there, and all you have to do is comment on this photo and tag a friend why you want to win this mask. This is the photo that you have to look for here. Dead easy. I'll pick a winner in a couple weeks. Thanks for watching. What is the largest animal you could single-handedly cling film to a lamppost? I think I could cling film a guinea pig. Not that I would, but I probably could.